Good morning, everyone. This is Valerie Gupte from People Matters, and we are back with yet another exciting session of our webcast with OC Tanner. They are our partners, and they are going to be our partners for this topic today, which is building the workplace of the future and observing 5 cultural trends of 2019. 2019 provides organizations an enormous opportunity to improve their workplace cultures to attract, engage, and retain talent successfully. 5 big cultural trends this upcoming year, will influence how organizations shape their employee experiences. In this webinar, we will share the latest research on 5 new cultural trends for 2019. To take us through their expert views, we have with us this morning Chris Drysdale, the creative director at OC Tanner, and Karan Bhasin, head of sales at OC Tanner. Prior to joining OC Tanner, Chris Drysdale was an ad agency executive responsible for 2 decades worth of award-winning TV, radio, print, and online commercials. He was the worldwide creative director for the Intel Insight campaign at the height of its glory. As creative director of OC Tanner, he co-authored the New York Times bestseller, Great Work, How to Make a Difference People Love. Karan works with his clients as a recognition and engagement strategist, delivering all their technology, strategy, design services, offline solutions, and consulting services across industries, but also customized to each client's needs. He demonstrates solid analytical and team management skills and has a proven track record of generating partnerships while cultivating deeper relationships across key decision makers. So we have some time saved for you to ask your questions and get your answers from the experts at the end of this webcast. And for those who are live, you can simply post your questions anytime during the session in the comment section on the right side of your screen. So without going through further time, I'm going to invite our speakers for today, Chris Drysdale and Karan. Welcome, Chris. Hi, Karan.
Hi,
Hello, everyone.
thank you for the introductions, and thank you everybody on this call for joining in. It is a pleasure to be speaking with you and sharing some of our research that we've done. And as you all are aware, we're going to be talking about the 5 cultural trends for 2019. As we move to the next slide, just to kind of bring in a little context to our discussion, I think it's very important for us to kind of understand what does the workplace of the future look like? What's workplace going to be like in, let's say, a few years from now? And when we think of that, it's important for you as leaders and an organization to understand where you want to be. And of course, you want to retain your best people, uh, where everyone is engaged, connected, they're working towards a common purpose, a place where top talent flocks and where they're able to innovate, they're building and really thriving at the workplace. Now, in order to do all of this in the future, it's very important for us to have the right workplace culture. A workplace culture where employees really do feel empowered, they are inspired by a meaningful purpose of what you're trying to achieve as an organization. They also need to see a sense of opportunity for growth and success, a place where strong leadership that cares about their people. This type of culture is really resilient to the changes and the disruptions and the challenges that occur all the time in our workforce. In fact, in a recent survey of CEOs by PricewaterhouseCoopers, 41% said that workplace culture would make the greatest impact on attracting and retaining the people they need to remain competitive in this workplace. 7 in 10 executives in a recent Deloitte survey said that their company culture would be critical to realizing their organization's goals and missions. So to kind of set the foundation, workplace culture is critical to building successful organizations of the future. Now that we've understood what does kind of the future of workplace look like, when we move to the next slide, we talk about what does the workplace look like today. So now that you've seen what it could be in the future, we talk about what is it today. In fact, in a recent survey which we conducted, and a research that we conducted, which is the 2018 Global Culture Study, about 66% of the employees said that they are engaged. Just over half of the employees feel positive about their leaders, about their well-being, about the appreciation and the sense of opportunities at their organization. And because of that, over half would accept another job at a different company, even if it was the same role, same pay, same benefits. Now, this is with the high cost of turnover. This is potentially devastating for companies, and this is really not the place where we want to be, or this is not the workplace of the future. And so it becomes important for us to kind of understand where we are headed and look at some of the trends from a cultural standpoint. As we move into the next slide, it is also, as we get into the next year, which is 2019, we have a huge opportunity. And there is a huge opportunity for companies to create a workplace of the future by building cultures that employees really want to engage with. So one of the elements is to look at, are my employees engaged? The other way to look at it is to say, do I want to engage with the company and the kind of environment that we provide? Next slide is really where a culture and an organization where people thrive. So the new research from our 2018 global research study shows there are 5 big trends which will impact organizations in 2019. And today we're going to go through those 5 trends and share how organizations can navigate to make the positive impact on your organization. So as we move into the next slide, really the culture trends, and the next slide, which is culture trend number 1, rise of technology integration in HR. Now we've heard about this term integration a lot. As we move into next slide, it's evident that the workplace of the future is the cloud. Yes, there have been a rise in the use of technology in HR space over the past few years. That's nothing new to us. But companies are now spending billions of dollars in technology for, let's say, recruiting, to performance management, training, engagement, data analytics, wellness, and it goes on. Yes, it's not just about automating or using technology in HR to make things easier, but it requires HR to truly be a digital business. Sure, the employees want seamless mobile, ease of use of technology to facilitate all their needs in the workplace. But true HR technology integration is not just about automation, it's about improving the employee experience and really driving productivity and innovation. For example, it's really not enough to move from using paper-based applications and forms, etc., to the digital way of doing things. HR departments really want to and must transition to an entirely new way of attracting talent and promoting company culture through technology. Now, the big question is, how can HR use technology to help employees bring their best and do their best at work every day? The next slide is pretty interesting. For all of you who've heard of Josh Bersin from Deloitte. Josh Bersin of Deloitte talks about this concept of HR in the flow of work. It means that all the technology that HR uses needs to come together or needs to be integrated in the existing tools that employees use at their work. Now, if you look at this model that he shares from time to time and keeps updating it, it shows how technology and HR has rapidly changed over the past about 30 years. If you go back to the 1990s, you'll see HR use technology mainly to automate the processes and systems. We then moved into using technology in HR to integrate and engage employees, build leaders, and improve culture. The next year and beyond, HR will be using technology to help employees be more productive, innovative, and connected to the organization. Now, this can happen only if tools are readily available to be accessed by employees in places where they're already working. The next slide gives you a little example of what the first culture trend speaks about. Here's an example of HR in the flow of work. Now, we all know that companies utilize a lot of tools for employee communication, interactions, right from messaging apps like Slack and Yammer, or some of the business apps like Salesforce and Outlook, some of the benefit tools like ADP, etc. So when it comes to something like simple as recognizing employees for great work, rather than adding it to your existing long list of apps and places where people go, by building a simple Outlook plugin, people can start recognizing and appreciating their peers. Leaders can do that, their managers, etc., can use it to recognize from Outlook itself. Or they can recognize someone when they're already communicating with them on the chat app of Slack, or working on a project together with them in Salesforce. HR in the flow of work means building in people and cultural activities in the normal tool and processes, or the flow of work, as Burson calls it, and your employees are already using today. One of the examples that comes to mind is this client of ours who we were talking to for a recognition solution, and they have an app for performance management, and they have an app for their wellness, and they have another app for their entire other self-services. They have another app for collaboration and chat. So the challenge that they really had is, how many of these apps and systems would you start building? And I think when we worked with them, that was the problem statement that was put forward. So what we really did is jointly work with them to really make these apps come together into one solution. So when we placed our recognition app, it was within their existing app that they're already using, to ensure that the experience of the employees of adding multiple passwords and login IDs and stuff was absolutely limited. Now, that's what we mean when we say integration in the flow of work. That's the first trend that we're talking about. When we move into the next slide, it is important for us to understand what is it that we can do as companies. So the first aspect that companies can do is build in ways to interact with employees that does not make them leave their normal flow of work. The next slide, it is really about using technology not to replace connections between people. And I think this is a big one to my mind. Technology really should facilitate but not replace quality interactions and connections in the workplace. What often happens is that people use technology to communicate rather than communicating in person. So your employee's sole method of communication should not really be these apps like Slack and text messaging and WhatsApps, etc. Messaging and productivity apps should increase collaboration and conversations for sure, not be used to replace them. And so, for example, use the tool to communicate when people are out of office, they're offsite, or unable to speak to you on the phone right now. But then finish the conversation in person or through a phone call, because there really is no replacement for in-person interactions and human connection. And our research shows that employees need to connect to three things really, which is also a sense of belonging and the earlier two that I spoke about, so that they kind of feel connected with the organization and the people at the workplace. The next slide talks about the third element, which is what companies can do to kind of manage this particular trend, is to kind of provide in-person opportunities of social interactions within the peer group. Super important that we kind of build in ways in which people can be a part of networking activities. They can have connect or human to human interactions, provide opportunities for mentorship between new and seasoned employees, be sure that new employees feel connected to their teams, leaders that they've not met with, and don't forget, of course, make time for having fun as well. So to sum it up on the first trend, by using technology appropriately, placing it in the flow of work, and using it to enhance, not replace, in-person connection, you can effectively and meaningfully integrate HR technology into the workplace culture. Coming to the next slide, we will talk about the culture trend number 2. Now, this big word of millennials, we've spoken about millennials so much. For the past decade, there's just been so much of research, speculation, and press about about how millennials have been impacting the workplace. When it seems that we're already tired talking about millennials, we're seeing their influence increase as many of these millennials are now becoming leaders. And they have an even higher impact and influence in the organization. So that being the second trend, if you move to the next slide, let's think of millennials as leaders. So what are they like as leaders? I think when you look at it, they still want to make the world a better place, right? They want a more collaborative work culture that allows for flexibility and work-life integration. Now, work-life integration is really different than work-life balance. Work-life balance means being able to come in late or early if needed, being able to balance their work and their home life, whereas work-life integration happens when the lines between your professional life and your personal life are blurred. Things like finalizing a proposal while I'm on vacation, taking a conference call while I am with my child's school game, checking an email before you go to bed, or logging in now to Facebook at work. This really stems from the desire that millennials have to create joy and meaningfulness in both their work as well as in personal life. Understanding that they are strongly interconnected becomes critically important as well. And finally, millennials, they want their bosses to be coaches, mentors, and not just managers. They really want to feel inspired, not told what to do. While there are traits that millennials look for in organizations, there are also areas that millennials will use as leaders on their own team. So you need to be thinking of those aspects as well. As we move into the next slide, there is this new word called the Gen Z or the iGen. This is a brand new generation that is entering the workforce. But they're born between 1995 and 2012, and they're more practical, but also more vocal when it comes to perceived injustice and inequality that they see at the workplace. They are hardworking. Many of them enter the workforce right out of high school or right out of their college graduations, instead of really pursuing higher education or are taking online classes while they're working. Now, they are quick to identify and pursue really higher growth opportunities, which means, like millennials, they are not afraid of moving to different jobs. but they are also very entrepreneurial and more competitive. They're highly connected technologically, so they are comfortable using social media and being dependent upon their devices for every aspect of life. They are used to the word, or they are used to a world of continuous updates that keep hitting them. So they process information very quickly, and are great multitaskers and can do multiple things at the same time, but can have a shorter attention span. But they are also lonelier and more depressed than the previous generation, likely because there is an overuse of technology, because they grew up interacting and communicating through technology every day. So they are more likely to be misunderstood when they're having in-person discussions and social interactions, and they crave for real connections with others. The other important fact to understand is Gen Zers bring a whole new set of challenges to this already complex workplace. However, Gen Zers are more optimistic, they're motivated, they tend to have a higher sense of purpose. They certainly want to change the world, as they are incredibly global. They know what's happening around because of the connected world that they live in. They can be strong advocates of great workplace cultures. They want to be a part of something bigger than themselves, and perhaps more than any other generation. They want to feel connected. The next slide, if we move on, while having so many different generations in the workplace, uh, it really is that while there are so many different generations in the workplace, they can make things challenging. Research, however, shows that when we are having multi-generational teams together, they significantly outperform, uh, and that there are than just the older people or just the younger people in a team flock together. So actually, it benefits the organization to have employees in different generations working together on projects, but with so many seemingly drastic differences in generations, how do we actually do this successfully is really the question. And if we move into the next slide, the key is to make the workplace one where all employees feel valued, feel appreciated, regardless of their age, gender, race, or background. There are a few ways in which we can do this. So if you move into the next slide, the first one is really by utilizing your people around a common purpose that is meaningful to each other. Their work gets harder together to accomplish that purpose. So let me give you an example. Think about a time when you actually worked on a team and went through a really tough time to complete a particular project. It was really hard. There was sweat, there were tears, um, there were a lot of disagreements and different opinions. There were long nights, high stress. But when you actually successfully came out on the other side, when you accomplished what you needed to, when you found that victory as a team, how did you feel about your team and your coworker? Chances are you gave them a high five, you went out for a celebratory lunch, you gave each other fun nicknames, you went back and recounted the funny stories when you were working on those projects, but you also became a lot more connected. Uh, and that connection can last a lifetime. So provide a shared reason of being, and you'll rally your employees from Gen Zers to baby bloomers, all kind of moving towards an inspiring cause that they work together on. As we look at the next one, what companies can do is really to encourage this cross-generational interaction and collaboration on the projects. We really need to be sure that to have teams made up of different employees in different generations. So encourage older employees to include and mentor younger employees in special projects. have younger employees seek advice and inputs from older employees on their work. Remember that the mixed age teams outperform single generational teams, and that working together on hard things can also become a bond and a reason of connection rather than the other way around. The third thing, if we move into the next slide, is really using recognition to bridge the gap and build relationships between generations. And if you really look at recognition, it is a powerful tool. By acknowledging and appreciating someone's great work, you can build a bond that is much stronger than so many of these team building activities and offsites that we do. Recognizing when an employee has done a great work on a project, or contributed to the team, or even disagreed with you at times. Recognize someone when they bring in a different perspective to a conversation, or a differing point of view on a challenging topic that you're discussing. Everyone wants to feel valued and appreciated for the unique contributions, no matter which generation they come from. And there really is no better way to do that than to give opportunities for leaders and employees to recognize their teammates. Now that we've looked at these two trends, we will now be moving into culture trend number 3. And in order for me, let me take this opportunity to kind of hand this over to Chris. Chris is going to be walking us through the rest of the culture trends. So over to you, Chris, on the rest of the presentation.
Thanks, Karan. That's really good stuff. I'm going to take over here and talk about culture trend number 3. Culture trend number 3 is really interesting. There's been a lot of talk in recent years about revamping performance management. And if you think about this for a minute, employees and leaders and managers, kind of everyone, really dreads the annual performance review. It's not something people really looks forward to. They're kind of miserable for employees, managers dread them, and everybody avoids them. And so sometimes these performance reviews that happen once a year feel like they're the worst idea ever. But contrary to popular belief, performance reviews are not dead. In 2019, the annual performance review will still be alive and well, but it will only be effective when it's combined with regular check-ins, with one-on-ones, with daily conversations, and other forms of mentoring. So performance reviews aren't going away, but they are becoming more of a subset of what we are all beginning to recognize as continuous performance management, rather than, once a year performance management. And this really makes sense. If you think about it, employees need to talk about their performance more than just once a year. Annual reviews, quarterly reviews, continuous one-on-ones, and daily conversations need to become a holistic and regular part of every employee's experience. According to our study, when companies used a single method of performance management, there was a decrease in perceived success at the organization if there was only a single method of performance management. So it turns out that discussing performance more than just once a year, discussing performance just once a year doesn't make employees feel very successful. So when two methods of performance management are combined, then there's a 44% increase in employee perceptions of success. And when 3 different methods of performance management are used, we see a 104% increase in employees' sense of a feeling of success at the company. So obviously, the more conversations we can have with an employee about their performance frequently, daily and weekly and monthly throughout the year, and how their performance relates to the company, then the better they're going to feel about their own success and the company's success, and also the relationship and the way they feel about their leaders. When you look at this next thought, When companies use these multiple methods, employees feel more connected to their leaders. They feel more inspired to do great work, and they also feel more in control of their careers, so that feeling of autonomy and growth. They're also more likely to feel their performance is fairly assessed, because rather than being surprised by what their leader thinks of them at the end of the year, they've been discussing their growth and their improvement all year long, and they're able to make tiny adjustments on the fly throughout the year. So it's really critical that we capture here the importance of the one-on-one or the one-to-one conversation. One-on-ones in particular are an essential part of performance management. They allow leaders to give immediate feedback on employee success, and they help employees grow and improve. They provide time for managers to set goals for employees and check in on projects, to provide mentorship and coaching, and give recognition for the great work that's being done all the way around the year. They also give leaders an opportunity to connect employees to the organization, its broader purpose, its success, and its people. So how many times have you personally thought, you know, what does my leader think about me? Do they even know what I'm working on? Are they aware that I just helped out on this huge project? Do they know I'm looking for a job somewhere else? By having regular one-on-ones with employees, managers can proactively ask the right questions and get a pulse on how an employee is feeling. They can gauge their sense of well-being and success, and maybe even prevent people from feeling the frustrations that will make them want to leave. So on this trend, there's a couple of things that companies can do right away to take action and improve. First, utilize as many methods of performance management as possible. This means combining annual reviews, quarterly reviews, and regular, ongoing, continuous one-on-ones. And just having daily conversations about performance and how people are doing. There should never be any question in an employee's mind about how they're performing and what they can improve on. Number two, it's really important in performance conversations to not just rate performance and offer constructive feedback, but also to celebrate what's going well, to recognize the achievements your employees have made, to align your employees' work to your purpose, and provide that mentorship and identify opportunities for growth that your employees crave. It's time to show employees that you care about them as a person and how they're doing and where their career is going. And this also promotes more positive well-being across the organization. That's the second tip there. Oleg Vyshpoletsky, global CTO at Daily Mail Online and Metro News in the UK. He recounts his very first management job and his first real management lesson after being promoted. Within 6 months of being promoted to management, one of his best developers quit. And so he was shocked, and he asked her why. And she told him since she didn't feel appreciated or valued and couldn't see the big picture or prospects for career growth. He absolutely valued her, but he realized he'd never taken the time to tell her that. And so after explaining he was just new and learning to be a leader, he was able to convince this developer to stay, and she did stay for many more years. So how many employees feel this same way, and that their leaders just don't care about them or don't think they contribute, and their leaders never find out? Ongoing continuous performance management will give leaders the chance to hear from their people and prevent those kind of issues that cause employees to want to look elsewhere. Culture trend number 4 is where our research gets really kind of interesting and counterintuitive. If you take a look, and Karen mentioned a little bit of this earlier, but if you take a look at technology, you might think that we live in a very, very connected world. We can Skype, we can video conference across continents, we can keep track of old school friends on Instagram or Twitter, and we can get emails about work at the beach, whether we want to or not. And people report, in spite of all that connectivity, people report feeling more disconnected than ever. So think about that. You know, maybe perhaps it's because social media makes us compare ourselves to all those beautiful connected people out there, and we just feel disconnected by comparison. But regardless of the cause, disconnectedness is very real. Let's look at the numbers for a minute. 42% of employees report that they don't have a close friend at work. 46% of adults report feeling lonely. And only 53% of all people report having meaningful interactions on a daily basis. So about half of all people don't even think they have any meaningful interactions at work. It's really sad. I recently read an article in Forbes magazine that reported that half of all CEOs feel lonely. And 61% of all CEOs believe loneliness is hindering their job performance. It's crazy. And the cost of all that disconnectedness is really high. $79 to $105 billion is lost every year in reduced productivity, absenteeism, and increased healthcare costs related to loneliness. So the question we have to ask is, how can we be so connected and yet so disconnected at the very same time? Neuroscience researcher Don Cacioppo explains that loneliness is not the physical absence of other people. It's the sense that you're not sharing anything that matters with anyone else. So think about that. We're sharing our cat photos and our carefully staged still life photos of our coffee, but we're not sharing the things that really matter: our hopes, our dreams, our fears, our goals, our accomplishments. So workplaces could play a really important role in helping people to feel more connected, but we've got a lot of work to do. What does disconnectedness look like in the workplace? It looks like this. Only 21% of employees say their organizations consider people a priority. Now think about that. An overwhelming number of employees don't think their company puts a priority on people at all. So we can do much, much better. Only 56% feel a sense of belonging and inclusion at work. That means that 44% of all employees are just kind of floating out there. They feel no connection to the places they work at or to the people they work with. So what can companies do? Number one, make connection and employee well-being a real priority. We need to stop seeing connection and social emotional well-being as some kind of soft thing that is just a nice to have in a business. It's really a mission critical priority. Not paying attention to connectedness is costing companies money. Second, we need to go beyond concern for physical well-being, things like losing weight or quitting smoking, and we need to focus on social and emotional well-being as well. This can be an important topic for one-on-ones that we mentioned earlier. Help managers get to know employees and support and mentor them in their meaningful life goals and ambitions. And third, use tools to connect people to purpose, accomplishment, and one another. This includes the latest employee recognition technology and well-being apps and performance management tools. Many companies like OC Tanner now offer these kind of tools as a suite of culture-building tools in the cloud. It's really helpful to bring it all together into a single unified effort to improve connection at work. Now let's talk about the final culture trend number 5. And that is the move from engagement to thinking about peak employee experiences. This is the most exciting finding in our study, in my opinion. We are moving from worrying so much about employee engagement, which we can almost never seem to really get our heads around and get a handle on and make real improvements in. And we're moving beyond that to something that is more impactful and more effective, which is creating peak employee experiences. And you know, the fact of the matter is we've found that organizations are discovering that driving engagement is a myth. You can't force people to engage. The only thing you can do is make your company the kind of place that people want to engage with. And that starts with better employee experiences. Here's some stats. Companies that prioritize employee experiences are 11.5 times more likely to be included in Glassdoor's Best Places to Work. They're 28 times more likely to be among Fast Company's most innovative companies. They're 2.1 times more likely to be on Forbes' World's Most Innovative Companies list. And they have 4 times the average profit and 2 times the annual revenue of companies that don't focus on the employee experience. So employee experience is a really big deal. Author Jacob Morgan says, in a world where money is no longer the primary motivating factor for employees, focusing on the employee experience and employee experiences, pardon me, is the most promising competitive advantage your organizations can create. So employee experiences really matter, but you probably knew that already. So let's talk about a deeper, even more essential reason to focus on employee experience. This is why. It's because that lack of connection that we just spoke of brings us to this point that connections are built by experiences. Experiences are the building blocks of connections. And if you think about this for a moment, just even in private life, as well as work, so in relationships, at work, at home, it's our shared experiences that build connections. So think about when you met your significant other or your spouse. You began to connect first through the experiences that you shared together. And they weren't just any kind of experiences, but they were a very specific kind of experiences. There's some really great emerging research about experiences that we found. And it says that all kinds of experiences we have, of all the experiences you have in life, most are in the middle near that dotted line. They're gray area, and they're forgettable. They're not really great experiences and they're not really bad experiences. They're just medium experiences, and we tend to forget all of those. But some experiences, the very most important and impactful ones, are the peak moments in our life. And those are the incredible highs in work, in relationships, at home, on vacations, wherever we are. Those are the highs that we remember long after they happen. So we had a gentleman named Chip Heath from Stanford University who spoke at our Influence Greatness Conference just this past September. And he uses an example of a day at Disneyland. And you could probably think of any theme park or a place that you'd like to go to. But he said if a family was to rank every hour of a day at Disneyland on a scale of 1 to 10, chances are that getting toddlers up at 5:30 a.m. to catch the early entry pass to the park would probably rank about a 3 or 4 out of 10 as an experience goes, because you got little crying babies and it's not very fun. And then waiting in line for a ride for hours that maybe breaks down right when you get to the front of the line, that would probably rank a 2. But then it's just possible that you'll hit one of the park's best attractions like Splash Mountain at lunch hour when all the park visitors are eating, and you get to ride your favorite ride 3 times right in a row, one after another with no line. And that might rank a perfect 10 on your experience scale. And then you have to find a restroom for your little 5-year-old child, and there's a line in the restroom for every stall, and your little child's crying, and that gets a 4 again. But at the end of the day, after a dazzling fireworks display, you run into Mickey Mouse, and you get to take a family selfie with all your kids in their new Mickey hats with Mickey Mouse in the picture, and that gets a perfect 10 again. And so the point is that if you take all those experiences, you might think that the average of all those scores for your day at Disneyland would rank about a 4 or a 5 because of all the lows and all the medium, just okay experiences. But behavioral scientists would tell us that the family would rank that day at Disneyland probably a 9 or a 10. And it's because of something called the peak end theory. That's peak-end theory. And it says that our peak experiences and then positive end outcomes, those two things, those two kinds of experiences have the power to erase all of our other experiences. So our peak experiences literally overwhelm all of our negative and neutral ones, and they can inoculate us against future negative experiences. It's a really cool and amazing insight, especially when we realize that if you look at this next slide, this is where most human resource professionals spend their time. They spend 80% of their time working on problems and focusing on trying to fix negative experiences. And we only get to spend 20% of our time creating peak experiences. So just imagine what would happen, I'm flipping the slide here, if we reverse that. And if we spent 80% of our time helping people experience great things at work, and 20% time on the problems. Sure, you'd still need to create policies and solve problems and have procedures to stop negative things from happening. But think of the connections people could make to your company, to their accomplishments, and to each other if you were focusing on creating positive experiences. Imagine unleashing the power of those peak experiences and how they might overwhelm and even erase the negative vibes that people might feel at work. To stop all the complaining, to create positive momentum, to fuel a pattern of shared success. These peak experiences are literally the silver bullet for helping people love where they work and choose to engage with the workplaces they're in. This makes your life as an HR leader way more fun, because there's no greater way to impact the bottom line of your company than to help people build connections through positive and memorable experiences at work. So to wrap up, what can companies do? Number one, focus on creating more peak moments in the employee experience. There's a lot of different ways you can do that. You can give people special assignments that they love working on. You can have positive one-on-ones that work where the managers and employees really connect. And then you can also attack number two, which is really helpful. This is where employee recognition really becomes a silver bullet, is that if you use recognition moments to celebrate individual victories, career anniversaries, reward daily improvements, help people become better in well-being, build more caring leaders. You can unite your workforce with events that bring people together. There's a lot of things you can do with recognition tools that create more of those peak experiences, those peak moments at work that not only uplift people and give them, a momentary buzz and a feeling of happiness and a feeling of accomplishment, but they also inoculate them against all the negative stuff that you just can't control, like deadlines and difficult problems that happen at work, because it is work. And so you need good things to be happening so that people can forget about all the bad things that happen at work. So finally, we just want to encourage you and help you understand and know that there are a lot of companies like ours who do this for a living. We literally specialize in creating peak moments, in creating service anniversaries for career years of service where somebody's really valued by their team at 5 years or 10 years. By creating daily ways to shout out and say, hey, good job on that assignment. I really admired your work yesterday. Those kind of things. And they really do make a big difference and can change how people feel about their work. So that takes us basically up to questions. And I'll turn it back over to Shanka, and we'll answer your questions.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you, Karan, for the amazing, rundown of the 5 different cultural trends that are going to be really crucial coming up in 2019. And I can see that we have some questions from the audience. So I will get right into, tackling those questions. First of all, one audience member is asking that as we wrap up 2018 and, go forward into 2019 and look into the future, however, what are some things that, we can take from 2018 into the next year? Some trends that have worked or some strategies that you see have worked in building a strong culture that are crucial for us, even if, we are in 2019 and maybe going forward into 2020 as well. So, Chris, would you like to tackle that question?
Sure. I think that some of the things we just talked about aren't completely new to people. For example, your recognition programs, if you've got them. I think just an attempt you can make to refresh and improve the recognition that gets given, to increase program participation. Frankly, a lot of companies have recognition programs, but they're not very well used. And so if I don't want to say you need maybe a different recognition partner, but if you need to assess that, it's really important. I think what this research about disconnection and lack of connection that we discovered in our global study, and the fact that connections are built by experiences, and the need to create more positive experiences, there's just no better way to do that than there's a lot of ways you can do it, but employee recognition is one of the very, very best. And so you should really analyze your programs and make sure that you have high participation, that your peer-to-peer recognition is happening, that leaders are champions of recognition and understand the value of recognition. Those are things that people should have been doing, really the last 10, 15, 20 years. Recognition has been becoming more and more and more important, but it's just seeming right now that it's more critical than ever.
Very true. And speaking of recognition, that kind of goes hand in hand with performance management. So I would like to turn to Karan and ask him this question. You spoke about all the different types of performance management, the way you can, have multiple interactions, maybe one-on-one interactions and, at regular intervals, so to speak. But can you give us some example or a case study where regular feedback has helped kind of achieve the end business goal? Because at the end of it, as you said, Chris, there is a bottom line that every business or every HR leader has to work towards. So how can we, as HR leaders, capitalize these regular interactions and make sure that we achieve that bottom line? Can you provide us an example, Karan?
Well, to me, it is as simple as my happy birthday is in November, and somebody's wishing me the next December or maybe the next January, right? It just doesn't make sense to me because, and in the recent conversation that I was having with one of my team members, and I was going through some of the goals that we've set for the individual, and during our discussions, when we were talking about the specific 4 or 5 different goals that we set, the question that I was asked by my team member was, can we not have this like once a month or once a quarter? And I was like, okay. And then I wanted to kind of try and understand why that question was asked. So I kind of probed a little deeper. And then the response that I got is that one of the goals that you set for us and the way you are kind of describing it now, I was a little unclear really if that was what you meant and that is what I'm supposed to achieve. And when you really think of your goal setting exercise, when you really think of your KRAs that you set for people where they're supposed to rank between 4, 3, 2, 1, etc. When you look at it from that perspective, maybe sometimes they are not very clear of what specific tasks am I supposed to do when I'm actually executing it through the year. So you don't want to wait till the end of the year to tell them that this is what I meant when I set that goal or clarify. If you're having monthly or weekly or quarterly discussions, you can go ahead and have them tackled there and then. And as a result of that, you'll see a change in the activities or the tasks. You'll see a change in the way the individual is working. And it basically saves time and things happen quicker. Nothing better than quicker, better, faster execution in this world. So yes, that's probably one of the examples that I can cite offhand.
That makes so much sense because if as an employee, if there's something that a person is can do differently or can do better, it's beneficial for both the company, the HR person, and the employee to kind of come to the table and discuss it right there and then, rather than spend 6 months to a year doing the same thing again and again, but to no avail. So that seems like such a very simple point when you say it, but it's very true that companies across the board are grappling with that situation. We have a question from a person from the manufacturing industry. So I'll just tackle that question. So they say that these 5 cultural trends that you've covered in your webinar, do they work for the manufacturing industry as well? And is there any other particular trend that that professionals in the manufacturing industry should look for or should adapt in 2019, so that they can create a better work culture, and specifically related to tech adoption and diversity? So any one of you feel free to tackle that question.
Go ahead, please.
Well, first of all, yes, the makeup of this study was across many industries in many countries, and so these culture trends are relevant and applicable to manufacturing. I think the thing that we find in manufacturing historically, and it's interesting because our company is a manufacturing company as well. We manufacture a lot of the awards that we sell. And we have found that in manufacturing, it's almost like sometimes people think, well, manufacturing's special because it's not the same as an office environment, and you know, people's jobs are a little harder, and they're maybe not working with technology every day, or they're not on the computer all day, or they're not in email all day. But the reality is that a lot of these things really apply, like the one-on-ones. It's really important to have people be involved in problem solving and in creating better efficiencies, and inviting people in those one-on-ones and continuous performance management conversations to be a part of the team and feel like they're not just a pair of hands, but you also invite their thoughts and their ideas in their brain, and then to recognize that when they come up with a great idea that saves the company money or that speeds up a manufacturing process, that they get recognized for that. Those kind of basic things make a really big difference. And so that's important. And then when it comes to tools, it's interesting because many years ago, when people were either on computers all day or they weren't on computers all day. And now you find that there's almost practically no one that doesn't have a cell phone. And so having those tools, a lot of them, your recognition tools and things like that, be things that exist on a mobile device, are just really awesome. And for myself, for example, when recognition became possible on my phone or through Outlook, right within email, where I could just click the little recognition button and within my system send some points to a coworker, or give somebody a shout out and say, good job, I loved your presentation just a minute ago. When I found I could do that with my cell phone, it really helped. And then another thing, finally, is that it's really a good idea in some manufacturing environments, we do this at our company, to have a non-technology solution, like some appreciation stations that have thank you notes and cards and buttons that you can just give someone moment. Hey, I want you to have this because I want to tell you how great you are. So anyway, there's lots of things that can apply in manufacturing, and it's very effective in manufacturing.
Thank you for that insight. I mean, you know, we always talk about, you know, tech solutions, and, you know, we have to have this type of HR tech and, you know, this different platform. But then at the end of it, you know, even the value of in-person appreciation, or like a notice board where your name is put up, even that can, you know, boost your morale and make you a more engaged employee. So that is a very interesting insight, you know, going forward in 2019, where we try to strike a balance between technology and the human touch side of things. We have time for 2 more questions. I would like to take up the question about multi-generational workforces. So we talked a lot about, you know, how a multi-generational workforce can be a good thing for the company, and, you know, some of the pros of it. But here an audience member is asking us, what are some of the challenges that come with this multi-generational workforce that we have, and how can HR leaders help the company overcome them? Maybe just you know, highlight one major challenge that you have seen, both you, Chris and Karan?
Karen, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the biggest challenges is to be able to see things from the other person's perspective. Um, when we're working in a project where there are a few people who are old generation versus a few people that are new generation, they obviously think very differently. They obviously want to complete a particular project in a particular way. So I think it's so critical to put yourself in the other person's shoes and think from what they're thinking, and then say that this is maybe the best way to kind of move forward is one of the critical challenges that you see, because the generation, the old generation wants to do things in a particular way. They're used to doing it in a particular way. They like it because it's a set process. But the millennials and the Gen Zers are here to do things totally differently. So are you even able to, for a second, put yourself in the other person's shoes and then think about it? I think we don't even think about it. So that's been one of the major challenges that we see, and in fact, everyone faces that. How about any things that come to mind with you, Chris?
Yeah, two things actually. The first is simply to avoid stereotypes. And by that, I mean, it helps us sometimes to step back and realize that most of these generational labels are made up. And just because you were born in a certain year doesn't mean you're going to behave in a certain way. I know some more experienced people, let's call them, like myself, that are very childish some days. And I also know some young people that are very mature and very patient. And so I think, just for one thing, I love what you said, Karen, about seeing things from the other person's point of view, but also just avoiding stereotypes is a really good idea. And then the second point I wanted to make was, built right into the webinar presentation we just gave, is this idea of mixing people up and making sure that you have multi-generational teams working on projects together. And I will tell you, just the mere act of breaking down barriers and having people work together, I know it might sound obvious, but we still make the mistake of bundling teams together by their age and experience too often. And then the walls start to go up and people start to look at, well, that old team is stupid or that young team is dumb. And if you've got multi-generational teams working together, a lot of those HR problems and those things that I can kind of imagine what you're alluding to, in that the person who asked that question, there are some conflicts and some problems when you mix generations together, but avoiding the mix creates bigger problems than putting people together.
That is so well put. I mean, to solve the challenges, to kind of embrace that challenge, where you just instead of kind of going in the traditional track of talent management, of grouping people of same level of expertise in one team, and that would kind of maybe there would be a gap between the skill set that is developed both in the millennials and the Gen Zers, and the people who are more experienced in the workforce. So kind of clubbing them together would be your advice for HR leaders, if I'm not wrong, Chris.
Yep.
Perfect. So with that, we have. I would just like to close off this Q&A by just asking both of you one thing that you would like HR leaders to start doing, and one thing that you would like them to stop doing in 2019.
Well, there are just so many that
you can pick only one.
Well, I'd like to talk about it in the context of our business. We meet a lot of HR professionals. We talk to them on an ongoing basis. And the business that we are in is kind of creating great workplace cultures through appreciation and recognition tools that we have. And what we've seen most often is that the HR professional is concerned when they're actually looking at, introducing a new recognition program. The biggest concern that they have is what are the kind of rewards that would be given to employees. And that is one thing that I hope HR professionals can stop doing, because it is not really about the reward. I mean, you can choose the world to give the rewards, but I think if you change the lens and start looking at how am I going to create a feeling of appreciation rather than rewards, is the one thing that I would rather stop having them do, is thinking about the rewards and awards that they want to give, and move the focus to thinking about how is that feeling going to be transmitted within the organization from a recognition, appreciation front. That's the closest that I could get and think of, considering the business that we are in.
Perfect, perfect. What about you, Chris?
I'm going to cheat and give two answers because I can't decide. But one is I would love to see HR leaders stop seeing their role in the organization as a cost center and begin to see their role as a profit center. That if you get this culture stuff right, you can literally impact the bottom lines of your organizations, and you can be the most important member of that executive team. So don't see yourself in an HR role as some kind of internal cost center kind of role, but see yourself as somebody who really has the potential, if you get culture right, to impact the bottom line of your organization. And then my second one is to reiterate something again from the presentation we just gave, which is stop spending all of your time solving problems and spend more of your time creating great experiences for your employees. And that's it. That's what I have.
That is a perfect ending to our webcast. Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you, Karan, for staying with us and for giving us such great insights and handling all the audience questions as well. We would like to thank our partner today, OC Tanner, and the speakers for giving invaluable information. Also, to the audience members, you can provide your feedback in the survey link that is provided in the chat session, because your input definitely matters to us, and every webcast we definitely would appreciate your feedback. Stay tuned for many more exciting sessions, and a big thank you to Chris and Karan for staying with us. With that, I would like to conclude our webcast today. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.